I think one of the faults that I see with beginning critics is that they try to write sort of what I call a very formal kind of speech, a college writing course speech or high school speech, where you don't feel that the person is really there. They're writing into some adult form. They feel, as a beginning writer, they feel nervous about themselves. They don't know, literally, they don't know their own voice, so they write in some formal way. And so you get sentences with lots of prepositional phrases strung together that don't have any punch, any energy.
You know,
they haven't come out of the event, whatever,
yeah.
it's a concert or whatever, and written it like a news lead, and here's what I feel, I've got this urgent thing to tell you. Instead, it's this formal writing.
In other words, what you're saying is they haven't developed a personal tone.
Correct.
I think that one of the things that I feel about young people writing, or any criticism at all by anybody of any age, is either implicitly or not, it's in the first person.
Correct.
And it's not a science, and you're not talking about the truth, and you're not saying, this is what happened. What you're saying is, this is what happened to me. This is how I feel. I almost think that in journalism school, they should make all reviews and criticisms be in the first person to remind people that it's their own view and not some kind of a scientific, objective overview, because there's no such thing as objectivity in the arts. It's all subjective, and you might as well admit that.
I have a personal style, a little creed that I started when I was 23 when I got my job. I know you were 24 when you got yours. And I once went to my editor, Clayton Kirkpatrick, the editor of the Chicago Tribune back then, and I said, you know, sometimes I don't know how to start. And that's always difficult for a young writer. How do you start? And he gave me a great idea, and he felt it even applied to criticism. And that was, he says, imagine what the headline would be and start with that. Write the headline. And so I've always tried to write the sort of, and as I was talking back with you, and I know we have different styles. Mine is much more like I'm covering a fire, only the fire is my reaction to the movie.
Yeah.
And I jump off into that approach, and I think that's a good way to start. Then I think people can develop a more essayist kind of style if it feels natural to them.
Yeah, I write a little differently than you do, but I think that, well, I know that over my typewriter, when I had a typewriter back in the old days, I had a little quotation from a book called The Immediate Experience by Robert Warshaw. And he said about film criticism, a man goes to the movies and the critic must be honest enough to admit that he is that man. Of course, you could say man or woman. I mean, he was a little bit sexist, you know. But the point being, you went to the movies. The group didn't go to the movies.
Right.
A demographic segment didn't go to the movies. Kids didn't go to the movies. Adults didn't go to the movies. You went to the movies. What happened to you? And if it happened, you have to admit it. Now, a lot of critics are almost shy about confessing that they've had any kind of emotional reaction.
Right.
I mean, if you laughed, say you laughed. If you cried, say you cried. If you were bored, say how bored you were. You know, but don't indicate that in a way you were kind of this aloof Olympian figure standing above the groundlings in the audience and observing with amusement their pathetic little reactions, because you were there and the review should communicate what you thought.
What you're talking about there is courage. Now, I know that, and you think about it in occupations, people would say, boy, you guys have a really soft job. It doesn't involve any guts to do what you do. But oddly enough, I think that, and this I think, the stakes are always being raised, no matter how successful you are in our job. And that is, you have to summon up the courage, just as you were saying, to say what you honestly feel. And it's not easy. And we're living now, there's a whole new world called political correctness that's going on. And that is death to a critic to participate in that. Wanting to be liked is another piece of advice
you know,
I would give.
You've really put your finger on something.
Can I just say one thing? Just wanting to be liked. Forget even the world of political correctness. Just personally, wanting to be liked, wanting to go along with the group. Death to a critic. Take your best shot. I know that this is something that you must say to yourself even now. I know I do all the time. I've been given this lucky break to have a chance to say what I think. If I censor myself, I'm going to regret it. I'm going to regret it.
Well, you know, when you said the words political correctness, all I could think of is a lot of college writers are either working for their student papers, or they're writing papers that are going to be read out loud in class or duplicated and passed around in class. Yeah. And political correctness is the fascism of the 90s. It's kind of this rigid feeling that you have to keep your ideas and your ways of looking at things within very narrow boundaries, or you'll offend someone.
Right.
Certainly, one of the purposes of journalism is to challenge just that kind of thinking.
Sure.
And certainly one of the purposes of criticism is to break boundaries. It's also one of the purposes of art. So that if a young journalist, 18, 19, 20, 21, undergraduate, tries to write politically correctly, what they're really doing is ventriloquism, you see. They're not saying what they think. They're projecting their ideas into another politically correct persona and trying to pretend that that persona reflects their ideas.
You know,
and that is tragic, because what you're doing when you're politically correct is you're training yourself at a very young age to lie. And it's really, you know, when I was at the Daily Illini at the University of Illinois, the whole point, we had all kinds of people on the paper writing everything from the Conservative Coordinating Council to the Young Socialist League, you know. And let's have a lot of opinions. And that's very important. And it's so tragic that at that key moment today on the campus, there's really such tunnel vision when it comes to political correctness that people are afraid to use terms or to have feelings that haven't been approved.
I think the other thing is that when someone does stand apart from all of these dangers that we're talking about, and they do shoot their best shot,
Yeah.
they're going to be empowered by it. They'll see that they're not destroyed. They'll see that they're not revealed as a flake, as a
Yes.
phony, as wrong, as stupid. Things that writers battle all the time. You do it one time, it's going to be nervous. You won't be destroyed. You'll be encouraged to do it again. And you'll start raising the stakes for yourself.
And from another point of view, you know, to some degree, when you're writing for the student paper, what you're really doing is applying for a job.
Sure.
Because you take your clippings,
That's right.
and then you send them in somewhere, and somebody will read them. If you write a nice, perfect little textbook, third-person review,
Right.
With all of the little kind of niceties in it, it's going to be boring for anybody to read. If you
Sure.
write as yourself, with your own voice and your own tone, if you read, in terms of the great writers, essayists, people like Orwell, or Gore Vidal, or Bernard Shaw.
I was just going to say
people
Shaw.
who speak in their own voice, then you will find someone to study.
Let me tell a little story. When I found out that I was going to get the movie critic job at the Chicago Tribune at 23 years old, and I knew it a couple months before, I was interviewing Burt Lancaster, of all people. And I told him, I said, Mr. Lancaster, I'm going to get this great job, and frankly, I don't know how to do it. What advice can you give me? He'd been around, to say the least. And he said, I'm going to send you a set of books, which he did. And I said, what is it? And he said, it's the music criticism of George Bernard Shaw, who wrote under the name Cornetto di Busseto.
You know,
and that was fabulous for me
Oddly
to
enough,
get.
right now, I'm reading a book called The Great Composers by Bernard Shaw. And also, of course, in every library is Shaw's prefaces to his plays. Read, you know, the plays are one thing, the prefaces are something else. Sometimes have nothing to do with the plays, but everything to do with finding a voice and speaking in that voice.
You use the phrase third person. Don't write in the third person. It's a perfect summary, I think, to what we're talking about. It's first person. It is you.
It's me.
Don't sell yourself
right.
out by writing about some other pretend guy or woman.
Yeah, it's you. It's you.